I actually think of myself as a problem solver because, if I see something broken, my big thing is to go and fix it. So bring me your broken radios and all those things, and I usually can get them going again. But I want to talk about some of the problems and what drives me and what has pushed me forward in my area. And part of my journey has been, as a human being, to be inquisitive about the world, and I'm always driven to find out what's behind the situation, or what's behind the facts, what's driving everything, try to understand the root causes of things. And science has been a great tool to understand lots of things, and it's meant I've been using science as a framework, as a logic framework, as a way of addressing issues and problems. And I spent something like 23 years as an academic in a university, training technicians initially, and then running degree programs and master's and PhD programs. And they were all centered on polymers, or we call plastics. And I originally started in this area because I thought, aren't these amazing technical inventions? We could do so much with them, and they were so efficient, and I thought, this is amazing. This was in the era of the 70s and 80s. And I realized, as I was teaching students, that we were busy making materials and then making more materials. And what happened with these after we used them, they were just thrown away. And I call that era the dig, use, discard era. So, I'm sort of defining the 20th century as the dud era, dig, use, discard. And we really shouldn't visit that. And this era, the 21st century, is going to be the era of short resources, because we are running out of resources. No matter what people tell you, we are going to run out of oil in 2040. Even though we're making lots of it and we can discover lots. And we know we mustn't put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We've got to stop using those things. Anyway, what drove me a while ago was this desire to do something about this enormous waste that we had. And I can remember as a child thinking about tin cans. I used to look at a tin can and think, isn't this an amazing thing, a tin can? What can we do with it? We've just finished using it for something, packaging food. It's so perfect. Why can't we do something about it? And I can tell you, in our household, nothing was wasted. Any food scraps went to the chickens, the dog, or whatever. There was always enough food, but nothing got wasted. But I wanted to give you a few facts and figures as to why it's becoming important to become an innovator in plastics, because it's such an important topic to understand well. This chart shows what's going to happen to the planet's population by the end of this century. We're going to have 11 billion people on the planet. And no matter what any of us do, we're probably going to be on this trajectory. So we're going to go from about the 7 billion, 7.5 billion, where we are now, to 11 billion. And we've already noticed that we are now having more malnourished and hungry people on the planet. Since about 2015, the numbers have gone up. So before they were declining. And if you have a look at food, globally, we waste something like between 30 and 50% of all the food we grow post-harvest. We lose that just after the food is grown. And there's another food which is called food waste, which is this bit, the red block here. So in Europe, we waste quite a lot of food. Something like over 100 kilos per head of food is wasted because we buy food and for whatever reason we throw it away. In Asia and Africa, very little food is actually wasted once it actually gets home. So we have this big issue of all the food loss of what we're growing. And in the case of India, India loses 40% of its food, and that's worth something like 11 billion pounds per year. That food loss, so it's water, it's fertilizer, it's chemicals, it's pesticides that they use, it's energy, and so food loss is a huge waste. And the issue about how do you preserve food, how do you get it to go further, is the important question. And this is where it eventually comes to plastics. Just to say a little bit about where plastics are made, China, and if we say Asia, make 50% of the world's plastics. And that's an important number to remember, because that is the location of population. And plastics are used for lots of things like clothing. It's a huge thing in clothing. And then it's used for packaging of food. 40% of all the plastics that are made are used for packaging of food. And just to give you the big numbers, this curve here is the cumulative amount of plastics we've made, because I think I mentioned this yesterday, nearly all the plastics we've made is still here with us on the planet because we haven't done anything with it. And because they're so long-lived, we've got this material accumulating. And this red line is all the waste that's discarded. So you can see we are here. So we're discarding around about 8 million tonnes a year. And over here, by 2050, it'll be something like 12 million tonnes a year being discarded. So, and that's a huge issue. And this is, when I started this work, it wasn't on this problem. It was on the problem of general waste, or why can't we do something about these materials? But this has now turned into a big thing, because they say by 2050, there'll be more plastics in the ocean than fish. So just think about that. We clearly have to do something about that problem as well. And in the media, you'll see photos like this. And this was in Dominican Republic after a big storm. And I know people talk about islands of plastics in the sea, and I'll just say they're not there. But this is there. This is here, right next to the coast, where people live, where there are rivers. After a storm, everything gets flushed out to the sea because they don't have waste management. So it just gets pushed out. And what we see here is what we call the tip of the iceberg, because 94% of all the plastics going into the ocean ends up on the sea floor. So that creates another problem because we can't even see it. And one of the things that we're doing as a company, we're running a program called Catch Plastics. It's all about catching plastics on land. And so we started this program about 2 years ago because I said, surely we can do a better job of what we're doing. And the whole idea here is that we go to the brand owners, the retailers, the supermarkets, and we say, the people who supply you with packaging. How do they manage all of their plastics? Do they let any of their plastics leak to the ocean? So we want to raise the consciousness of the whole supply chain, and we also want to give them the techniques of stopping that from happening. So that's something which is going. We've written a book, there's a report, and there are programs which are written for schools and for businesses and for retailers. In the supermarkets, what are the supermarkets doing? They're really scared because this whole area of using plastics for food is so important because it makes sure food lasts longer. It makes sure it's not contaminated. If you go to a supermarket, people will prefer to buy packaged food with a wrap around it because they'll think it's pristine, it's not contaminated. If they see it open, they think, well, is it pristine or not? Or is it contaminated? We went to a village giving a program on Catch Plastic, and they said, the greengrocers said, we can't sell food if it's not wrapped. People won't select it. When we went to India, it's the reverse. People want fresh food and they don't want it wrapped. So it's another story. But there are lots of problems, and there's been a lot of controversy about black plastics, and this is the CEO of a supermarket, and he's saying, we've got to get rid of all these black plastics. And strangely enough, 6 years before this event, we developed a solution because we had the British Waste Organisation coming to us and saying, can you solve the problem about black plastics? And I'll show you later how black plastics are sorted. But this dairy, the collective dairy, has just changed the pigment from carbon black to a new pigment that we designed. And that, because we had the problem, how do you make something look black, yet have it still automatically detected? I'm going to show you later how an automatic detection process works. So we had to develop a technique. And so just thinking about the innovation process that was going on before, we looked at the problem and we had 10 different solutions. We came up with one, and this is the one that we eventually took to the market.
Why does it need to be black?
People like to have a black lid or a black tray. But you raise a good question, but there are reasons for it, and I can go. And so if you get one of these lids, hold it up to the light. If it looks green around the rim, that's our new pigment, which is solving the problem. I'll just pass it around. So what is happening out there in the wider world? The big brands like Coca-Cola, Danone, McDonald's, Unilever, PepsiCo, Eco, Werner Mertz, all these companies are saying, you know what, we realise we're not doing the right thing. Now we're going to take recycled plastics and put it into our products. Every milk bottle you pick up has 25% recycled content from a process that we developed. So when I first came to the United Kingdom, we were asked, can you make a food-grade recycled polyethylene? Like, can we take milk bottles back to milk bottles? And we were challenged with developing a process that would remove all contamination from consumers, which we had to do. So, and we used different technology steps to do that, and I won't go into it. But this is now happening. And so 5 years ago, we had technology to do this. I went to the companies and they said, why should we do it? They didn't really have the reason to do it. Now, they're hammering on the door saying, can we have this material? And around the world, they're all scrambling to find high-quality recycled plastics, which is actually not easy to do, but it can be done. So the world is changing, and this is part of the drive. And now governments are getting in. Governments are saying, we're going to specify and regulate how much recycled plastics will go in. So a lot of the things that I had to respond to are now going to be so easy because there's legislation driving all of this. And in November, the government announced that there will be a tax on any packaging that doesn't have recycled plastics content. So this is going to drive a huge change throughout the whole industry. And so as a result of this, I have to leave tonight after my talk because we're designing a big plant in UK that's £50 million and it's taking about a year to design. So that's sort of the net result of all that. And here's some of the products that we've been developing. And you can see one has recycled content and one doesn't. And I actually forgotten which is which. But there is a bit of a difference. But would a consumer mind? You know, I don't think it makes almost any difference. And yet the brand owners used to be so finicky. They used to say, oh no, we can't have any difference in colour, even if you use recycled material. And that actually is technically quite difficult. But we've solved that problem as well. And this is polypropylene. And so we had the food, the Indian food last night, all those trays could be all recycled back into food-grade polypropylene. If I had my little machine, I would have done it all. And so we can do that and lots of things. If you go to Waitrose, you can buy a cup. This is a reusable coffee cup. This cup has been designed by one of our associates, and we make the resin here, the body of this cup. And that's made from a mixture of recycled plastics and coffee cups. So coffee cups are going to make the outer of those cups. And here's this black plastic thing, which I'll show you in a moment. It's not brilliant. No, it does keep it hot, but it's not brilliant. No, because ideally you need a vacuum to do that. So if you want really hot coffee, get a vacuum flask or something. But it's a technical problem. Just you're using plastics. They've got reasonably high thermal conductivity. But it's simple to make, and it's demonstrating to the consumer that A, you can use a reusable cup, and the existing coffee cups are being used to make the outer. So if you go to Waitrose, they won't sell you coffee in a cup. You have to buy a reusable cup. So the world is slowly changing. So some of the things we're doing is we're on this issue of food waste. We're working in India on a project called BioFreshPack, which is all about not making packaging like this, I should say. We're making packaging for from the farm to the market, so that the farmers can actually have their food lasting longer without refrigeration. And it's all to do about making the material permeable, and we're using waste starch as a modifier for conventional plastics to make the film breathable. So, and this is another project in Malaysia. We're making packaging for fruit, things like this, and this is being made from palm fronds and compostable plastics. So again, we're turning waste into packaging. And this is some of the other things that we can make from those coffee cup-like materials. We can make lots of materials from them. Oops. I think I will. There is a video here. I don't know if I can see it. I'll skip it in the interest of time. One of the things people asked us to do was, can you sort plastics and make sure that the only thing that you get at the other end is food-grade material? And the way these plastics work is they work on a system, or maybe I will show the video. Is there someone who can we have a look at this video, whether we can run this? Oh, here we are. It's okay, I think it's running. Is the audio on? Dare I do this? No. This is the sort of machine. Okay, I'll just plug that in. Okay, so I'll just talk it through. So these are bottles. This is how your things from the curbside get sorted. They go on a belt, they pass under a light, and there's a light beam that passes over each individual bottle or container. It shines back into a detector. The detector then checks a library of products and says, what product is this? And then it will say, eject one or drop it. And you'll see at the end of the belt, these materials, when they go through, a jet of air that corresponds to the position of the plastic bottle ejects that particular bottle into the right category. So this is how all of your plastics are sorted every day all around UK, but you probably never knew how it was done. But this uses light, and it uses the infrared signature to determine which plastic this actually is. So, and this is done at 3 meters a second. So it would go from here to the board in a second. So it's moving very fast, and we can sort 5 tons per hour at doing that sort of thing. So somebody asked us, can you now separate these based on the type of food that was in there? So we developed a label which is fluorescent under ultraviolet light. And there's a video here, and I'm going to show you this. No, the audio's not working. However, what you'll see are blue bottles and red, bottles with blue labels and red labels. And we mix these bottles in a demonstration. This is the prototype test that we were talking about before, making sure it all worked. So you can see our red bottles and blue bottles mixed in with lots of other plastic bottles from the curbside. And here they are going under the ultraviolet light. And then you can see some of them being picked off. So only the ones that we wanted to be picked off were being selected for the pick-off. And so you can see here at the other end how they're being sorted. So you can see the general ones, and the ones we're picking off are perfectly picked off. And this is proving that if we dedicate those labels for food grade, we can then separate food grade materials. So, coming to the end. And I know in this whole area of plastics and packaging, people are asking the question, how do we change the problem? And to me, the issue of packaging is all about making packaging that's sensible and needed, especially if it's needed for food. And then we have to do something at the end of that cycle. And what is going to happen is we're going to create a circular economy. We're going to reuse that material again and again. And we have to do lots of these things on the land before these materials get near the water and near the ocean. And there are lots of things happening out there. People are trying to make degradable and compostable plastics, which are not the answer, I'm afraid. A lot of people would love to see everything being compostable, but it's a bit like trying to make everything from a banana skin or an orange peel, because people feel if someone throws it away, eventually it will disappear. But if you saw the volume of packaging that we use, it would create a huge problem. So we have to pick it up and do something with it anyway, and we may as well get the benefit of reusing this material. So the thing that inspires me is what people have done, and I'm not saying we should be going to the moon, but where we have problems, I always think there are solutions. And you probably don't remember, but I remember when the first man stepped on the moon, and because I was at university then, and we watched it happening live. And can anyone tell me how long it took from when President Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon, how long it took to actually step on the moon? Anyone know?
It's not the day you
It is. Okay, so it took 9 years. So when you think, thinking, no one had ever been to space. In fact, one person been to space for 10 minutes when they made that promise. Alan Shepard went to space, and he was out of the atmosphere. He just went up, out, and then came back down again. President Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And they did. Why did they do it? They had an absolute focus on doing this. And they planned the whole thing out, and they developed all their prototypes, the 1-man, the 2-man, the 3-man capsules, the landing modules, and so on. And this shows us that if we have a problem with climate change, if we focus on it, we can do it. We just have to have the will. We have to recognize that there is an urgent need, and we put all the resources behind it. And frankly, climate change is more important than going to the moon. We're talking about the survival of the planet. So all those issues relating to that, are soluble. Plastics in the oceans, completely soluble. We just have to recognize for the problem and then start to work on it. So, and you can see from this, I've really just been a problem solver rather than an innovator, because I didn't dream up the solutions because there was a blue sky. I saw the problem and I said, what can I do with my skills to fix that problem? Thank you. So, do we have time for questions? Yes? Yes. I have time. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
How many times can you recycle a plastic bottle?
I get that question asked lots of times. Probably practically 10 to 15 times. And if you keep it going through the loop, it's always joined with new material anyway, because you never recycle the same thing through the same loop all the time. So more or less, you can keep on doing this for a very long time.
So is there a waste product, a small waste product?
So you don't get a waste product. If you keep on doing that, the properties degrade and you can't use it back in the original application. So what you do is you make it into something else. So as in a quick example, if you have a PET bottle, we haven't got any here, we have some bottles. In Asia, they don't make more bottles from the plastic. They turn to textiles and clothing. So then when it's in clothing, it's gone out of that loop. So we can do lots of things like that. We can use it for one application like food products, then we can use it for textiles, and then we might use it for building products or shipping materials. But in each case, we're displacing the need to make more new material because we'd always otherwise make new products for that. So there's lots of opportunity in the circular economy.
For people in this room who are interested in the environment and are really looking to become involved, is there a role for them in this in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah. Very much at home and in their communities as well to organise really good collection. In Britain, British consumers are not good at recycling. There is as much recyclable material in the black bag, which goes to landfill, as in the recycling bin. So if they increased their attention to recovery, because everything you separate goes for separation through automatic systems like that. And those plants are right across the UK. And they're in the US as well. But the US has very cheap landfill. So in Britain, it costs £150 a tonne effective to landfill something. So you have to pay to go to the landfill. In the US, it's about $20 to $30 a tonne. So lots of big holes.
I have two questions. Is there a requirement being enforced by companies to recycle a certain minimum of plastic, and also for countries that don't have a recycling processing plants, what do they do then? Because I know there's a big problem with exporting that and that is also an impact on the environment.
Yes. So do companies have that requirement? They have now set themselves targets. And these targets were set from the beginning of 2018 right through this year. And the targets are now getting more and more ambitious. And very soon we're going to say, we don't have to export any plastics to Asia because we're going to have enough market in our own country. So in UK, that's where we're heading. And we've already projected when that will happen. So it can be done. So it's been voluntary, but the government has announced a tax on packaging that doesn't have 30%. So what's going to happen is, before the tax comes in, everyone's going to say, we don't want to get taxed. We're going to buy recycled plastic. And then the people who've got recycling factories will say, well, we're going to sell it to you for a good price, and they'll reinvest to make more, and so they'll collect more, they'll make more, and they'll recycle more. For island states, let's say like Trinidad and any island where they bring products in, the best thing they can do is collect these materials. If they collect them, they will be in big demand because they can export them to, say, the US or elsewhere, and they will use them where they have a recycling plant. Or people can actually build their own recycling plant on their own island, and this is sort of like a turnkey thing now. It's something that can be done relatively easily.
Is there any solution that we can use, like individuals, to recycle the plastic, or is it always just repeat?
Very minor, unless you want your house to look like a big plant. No. It's really not all that good. I know it's very tempting to say and to try and do that, but what can you do with all this material? And the recycling plants are excellent at cleaning and then decontaminating. They have techniques and machines that can actually do quite extraordinary things. The purity has to be extremely high. So whatever you do in your house, you might be able to reuse something for storage or whatever else, but very often you can't. What I would say that individuals should do is not buy things that are what I call trivially packaged. Supermarkets still make things that are not recyclable. Don't buy them, because the supermarkets quickly get the message. When people stop buying a product, they say, what's wrong? Why do they stop buying it? And they'll dig in and they'll find out very quickly, and then they'll change. And the supermarkets have all said that they're going to be 100% recyclable by 2025. Why is it taking so long? They should be able to do it now. Because we're still generating waste before 2025. There's a big scramble to try to solve this issue.
So throughout your career, you've identified the problem and you've come up with a solution. So how have you then gone to the people that matter, that make the decisions, and convinced them that they should adopt your solution?
Okay, that's a really good question. So when I designed my first recycling plant, by the way, a company came to me and they said, I was at the university, and they said, can you design a recycling plant? So they came to look at our research. I said, yes, but I knew that I couldn't. We hadn't done one before. So, but I said yes, because I thought, sure, we can do it. Very sort of optimistic view. And so the problem was already there. I already had my challenge, right? So, and to solve a problem, all you had to do is to say, well, who are the best people to speak to about this? And there were already companies that were sort of doing the right thing already. And we would simply go and talk to the best people in the world, wherever they were, get their, if you like, intelligence about how to approach the problem, and then take the best solutions, put them in place, and then start to work with them, find out the problems that we had, solve the problem. So it's an iterative process. So failure is quite normal in this area. And I always liken it to buying a car. If you buy a car and it doesn't work, you'd say, I've got a lemon. You'd take it back to the garage and say, you've got to fix it. In the area of recycling at that time, it wasn't like that. You had to buy the equipment, and then you had to solve the problems you had and keep on working on this, because it was such a new area at that time. So it's the challenge of the problem was solved by looking at best techniques. And sometimes we had to develop new techniques as well. So the black plastics one, the lid, for example, you know, if you just switch the pigment in the lid, that makes it go from non-recyclable to recyclable. The supermarkets, when they looked at the solution, they said, we're going to have to pay 0.3 of a penny extra per tray. They said, oh, we can't do that. Right, 0.3 of a penny, you know? And so, and this is why I question the CEOs to say, you have the rhetoric at the top, you've got to do the doing at the purchasing level as well, make the changes happen. Have I answered the question?
Yes. Yes, and also, would you say that most of the time you've been reactive in terms of, is it a supermarket or a client anyway who has said, we've got this problem and come up with a solution? Or sometimes you have independently gone, there's a problem here, who can solve it, now we need to...
Okay, so this cup was an innovation that we came up with. We worked on recycling coffee cups 8 years ago. That's when we started the process, and we developed the material. And when the recycling of coffee cups came on, someone asked us, can we make a product out of coffee cups? I said, yes, we have it. Off we went. But we're in the main reactive, because the problem was there. People came to us to say, can you solve the problem? And sometimes they came to us as like the second choice. Sometimes because often these are tenders, and you put your bid in, and we were always a little bit more expensive, and as it seemed to be, but we solved the problem in the long run, so we were good value. Better to spend the money once and get a good result rather than spending it twice and get a result after more money. But anyway, it's the thing that we work with teams, we work with lots of companies around Europe to solve the problem. We try to get the best technology to solve the problems. I used to work for a company when we built the first plant, and this fellow said, you can solve any problem with 5 people. If you haven't solved the problem, then you have to change the 5 people till you get the right 5 people, but you will solve the problem. You just have to get the right people. And he never asked one person to solve a problem. He asked 2 or 3. So, and it was always solution focused. So that was the way to do it.
Thank you, Ed. I have so much respect because I know how much you care about this, and just for the action you took for that and what you're doing. It's really, really impressive. Thank you. My question is, are there opportunities that you see working from inside the industry for investors to get involved? Where are the gaps, and what are the investment opportunities where there can be an ROI?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. there are, and the investment opportunities are at the big scale end of things. So, you know, if I give you an example of what a petrochemical plant does, they make maybe 200,000 tonnes of plastics out of a small plant. A big plant will make 1 million tonnes a year, but a recycler will make 20,000 tonnes. So if we're really going to tackle the big problem in a big way, we have to have massive recycling plants, as big as the plants that we use to make plastics. And the signs are that that's coming. But so we're talking about large amounts of money. So in the hundreds of millions of pounds. That's the gap.
It makes me link to the what was mentioned earlier today about pension funds.
Yeah.
Having that kind of funding available for something like that. Is that being done now? Is that being looked at?
It's too new and seen as too risky. So it's only happening with companies who are already in the field, like waste companies who have got already collecting material. They're saying, how do they answer the question of China not taking the waste? So their answer is, well, let's recycle it here. And so they're the ones in doing the investing. But eventually the petrochemical companies will invest, and they are already. We're already seeing that. And I won't go into detail, but it's already happening. So in 5 years' time, we'll have a very different world, and we'll be recycling a lot more.
Can I ask one final question?
Yes.
So I'm curious from your experience. You have amazing depth and breadth of experience. What I'm going to share, one is when I was living in Japan, I was blown away by not only the policy, but the culture.
Yes.
You would almost get taken to jail if you threw like plastic away. It was that serious. And I was wondering, I don't understand how, from your perspective, how could we shift the mindset into more countries to be, is it only based on policy that sparks the change, or the economics spark the change, or do you have any other solutions for basically changing the human behavior of it?
Yeah, okay. So in Britain, they've discovered that tax works, right? So in 3 months, the number of plastic bags used in supermarkets dropped by 80%. Why? Because they said, you have to buy a bag, and you have to pay 5p. All of a sudden, people, instead of buying a bag for 5p, which they could afford, said no. They'll buy a bag for £1 and reuse that bag. And so it's the avoidance of impact that created the change, which is very interesting, because if you said to people, we'll sell you a bag for 5p, or try to make it like a discount, then they're happy to forego the discount, but they want to avoid a tax. So the government now is looking at taxing lots of things, because it brings revenue and it minimises people's choice. And what it's doing is changing what I call that dig, use, discard mentality. Because now people have to pay for it. They say it's of value, whereas before they were given it and they say, well, it didn't cost me anything, I can throw it away. So this is the big issue. And now the fast food companies are looking at this very carefully as well. They're trying to see how they can retain their packaging and stop littering and so on. So it's a difficult thing. So if you want to buy coffee in Waitrose, as I said, we were there, you have to have a cup. You have to bring your cup to Waitrose to get a coffee. We're changing behaviour.
Also, if I could just add to Japan, with those previous questions, how they actually do it, like how they make the mindset different, they start with kids. So when you go to their school, the kids are the ones that are cleaning the toilet. They are really living collectively, so maybe that's how they change the mindset.
But that takes a generation, and we need to change now. And so there's lots more that has to be done.
I think we have one final question.
Really simple suggestions. I don't know, maybe everything with you. One idea would be plastic shaming, like you know how cigarettes they say don't smoke in content, or maybe you start shaming people like with pictures of. So yeah, I think this is one idea to take that forward by making your packaging informative, yet like making people more aware to that. And another idea would be, you said throwing the plastic bottle and it doesn't fit in the circle of the recycling thing, I'll just throw it in the general waste simply because it doesn't fit. I know you look how you're looking at me. But yeah, but yeah. So I mean, you're saying that this is a problem. There's a lot of recyclable things in the general waste. So why don't you sort that out by maybe creating like something magnetic maybe in the lid of a plastic bottle, so that even if I'm not doing my job, it could be picked up by something not as complicated as interact, but it will be picked up by the magnetic field, which is cheaper.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're now sorting through the waste. So we had the two guys from Poland yesterday. In Poland, they have no recycling at all. Can you imagine that? Everything goes into one bin. So what they do in Poland, they take the one bin and they sort through that with machines. They take the recyclables out. So we can actually do it. And airports could be better off. But I watch people are not really careful about. You know, I watch cleaners. I was at an airport and he swept up the floor somewhere and tipped it into the recycling side, you know, rather than the waste side. And so how do you win? We're on a bit of a journey and we are transforming people's habits as well. In Japan, there are no coloured bottles, which makes recycling really easy. And recycling is fantastic. If you're a recycler, you get bottles that look like washed, hand washed and so on. You can apparently leave your bicycle at Tokyo Station during the day, unlocked, and come back at night, it's still there. So, not true? Oh, well, there you are. But when I was there, you could go to a vending machine sitting in the countryside, no marks, no paint, no graffiti, all working. You know, people are quite different. So it is cultural change, and we do have to make things easy. The easier we make it, the more people respond. If people have to walk 30 metres, we often won't make it. People are inherently lazy. Yeah. 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 And if you do get a plastic bottle, make sure you put the cap back on, squash it, put the cap back on before you put it back, because the recyclers can separate the cap from the bottle really easily. Don't throw the cap in because then it'll get lost. If you attach to the bottle, it'll go all the way in. So there's a good hint for everyone. Yeah. Okay. Yes, put the lid on. Squash it flat, put the lid on, put it into recycling. Because they'll recycle the cap. Yeah. Yeah, but we can separate it. Yeah, and it's valuable. Okay.